go back and teach with their youth. So if you guys haven't met me, I'm Dr. Kris Hiney. I'm the Equine Extension Specialist for Oklahoma, so I'm a little underdressed. The Oklahoma switch in weather caught me off guard, so now I'm wearing a sweatshirt. And I want to introduce a couple other people with you guys here today. So this is Amber Wells. So Amber is our new master's student working with me in Extension, so she's going to be helping out tonight. And then two very, very important people that are with us tonight, Rosa Rita, that apparently is going to be the feature player. I love this. This is like Extension at its best, right? So we always have to roll with what we get, and this is perfect. But I wanted to introduce Mr. Todd Branson. So Todd is the Canadian County Educator. So he is a partner in this project. Actually, this is a project that Dr. Doy kind of developed that we allow our undergraduates an opportunity to do extension programming and learn what extension is and how valuable it is. So Todd is a partner on this with me, and then our extension scholar is Julia Sanderson, and she is actually from Michigan, but was really involved with 4-H there. And so this is kind of her baby, so she's been working on this program. And so I'm going to let her kick off our first inaugural night of our first project. And so she'll be kind of guiding our program tonight. We do want to make it kind of fun. We'll also be taking little breaks and going around to look at this facility's equipment. I don't know, Jessica's still back there. Shout out to Jessica with Nexus Equine for allowing us the use of our fantastic facility here. And I don't know, did you want to say anything, Jessica, before we get started?
Thanks for coming. I'll have roasters. It's been a week.
Okay, so it's been a week. But Nexus is partnered with Oklahoma 4-H on a number of different programs, and delighted to actually use the facility for this program tonight. So with that, housekeeping, we need to do sign-ins.
Yes, if you're not signed in, behind the facility right here, there's a QR code. You can use your phone and sign in. It'll ask you for a list of events. This is Barn Logic, Barn Basics. So just select that on the top down. We invite you for everybody to do that. And then at the end tonight, we have some surveys that we would like for you to fill out on your experience here tonight. And we'll be doing this after each one of these series to kind of improve what we're doing and to get the information you guys want so that we're all having a lot of fun together. So thank you for coming. If you have any questions about the county's 4-H program, please come find me, holler at me. I'll be happy to talk to you about everything that we're doing in the world of horse. We just opened up our 3rd horse club, so we've got 3 active horse groups in Canadian County in 4-H. So very, very exciting.
Yeah.
I took more than I needed.
No, that's good. And then hopefully you guys are going to have a super good time here. And then our next one in the series is October 10th at the Canadian County Extension Building, and that's going to be on feed. And then our 3rd installment will be at the AQHA World Show in Oklahoma City on November the 4th. And we're going to be teaching you about trailer safety and doing some hands-on activities there. So, all right, now that's probably enough of the talking, and we'll actually let Julia get started.
All right, like she said, my name is Julia. I'm really excited to get into this with you guys. Tonight we're going to talk about some barn management, some facility management style stuff. Would you hit my thing? Sorry. First thing that we wanted to cover was stalling. So stalls are where horses spend, depending on how much you do with them, a majority of their time or their nighttime or not at all. One thing that's really important is making sure that your horse or whichever animal you decide to put in the stall is going to have enough space in the stall. For a regular sized quarter horse, just as the base, a 12 by 12 stall is what we go as like just very basic. That's where we're going to start at. That's the good to go. But if you have larger horses or smaller horses, like a little donkey wherever she went, you're going to do 1.5 the size of a horse's length. I believe in some of our worksheets you can follow along as well. So walls, that is for the entire area, what we're talking about. When we talk about wall spaces for horses, we don't want them to be too short because we don't want our horse to jump out, and we don't want them to be too tall without having access or airflow from above. Next up in our small space, we're going to talk about what's going to be in the stall. So we're going to talk about the materials used to build them and make them. One of the most important things is the footing on them. So footing is typically either packed dirt, concrete, sometimes there are padded plastics down, but having a solid footing on your stall is really important to make sure your horse doesn't injure themselves while inside. Materials that you're going to build your stall out of should also be strong enough to hold your horse in the stall. So we don't want to put it up with just some very thin plastics. We don't want to put it up with just some hay wire and call it good, say, oh, it's going to stay, because it's not. That horse is going to test it, and they're going to want to go through. So when we talk about materials, some of the more important materials to keep and build our stalls from would be wood, heavy plastics, or metals, because those are less likely to break, bend, or fall out of place when a horse is moving around the stall. We also want to make sure that the horse is able to safely get in and out of their stall. So the door should be 4 feet wide at minimum. They can go up to 6 feet or even wider, but you just want to make sure that there's enough room for that horse to safely pass through on all 4 sides. So you don't, if there is an overhead for the stall, you want to make sure that it's not too short so they're not going to bump their head when they're on their way out. Another place in the stall that is important to think about and allocate for is feeding. Most people choose either like one corner or one spot in the stall to continually give their feed. It's important to remember that hay can be messy, so can feed, and horses typically graze their feed, and so separating the feed and the water and encouraging them to go back and forth is also really important in their stall. Another thing with the stalls would be the potential hazards. So some of our hazards are the footing underneath, whereas you can see these stalls go all the way to the floor, so there's not gaps for them to stick their foot in. So when we're talking about gaps, we don't want them to be big enough for the foot to come out, for the hoof to be hanging out in the stall. But if there are gaps, that's totally fine. 2 to 4 inches, something small like this where the hoof cannot fit through, perfect. We just don't want our horse to get stuck when we're not out there and not able to help. Other issues that can happen in the stalls as horses use their stalls, move around, kick the boards, do what horses do, is we've got to always check out for splinters in the woods, nails coming out, other hazards such as like mats flipped up, things that the horse can get themselves into and potentially hurt themselves on. Yes. All right, we're going to take a little moment to talk about the stall spacing. So here we have Mr. Buster. He's 31 inches at his withers, and across he's going to be 56 inches. 30, this wide? He's only going to be 3 feet long? Oh, okay. Sorry. He is 36 inches tall and 36 inches wide. How big would his stall be? If it's going to be 1.5 times his size. Yes. If another half of the group wants to come with me, we can look at another stall down here so we're not super crowded over there. All right, let's look at her stall then. Okay, so if we're going to put our horse up in this stall, what do we want to make sure that it's safe for?
We want to make sure that the door's only open so the horse doesn't hit his side or feet.
Yeah. Do you guys want to look around? You can go in, look around, have a look around, see if you can find anything that would be a potential hazard to the horses, anything that you would fix. Yeah, you guys can go in, have a look around, feel it out.
Curtis would do that. Curtis would do that.
Curtis would do that. How are you?
How are you?
Doing good.
Nice size stalls.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you guys think about this outside area?
I think it's good for a horse. The gate kind of makes it a little nervous just in case the horse gets scared of something at the inside and runs out.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Why don't we back up and look in this stall. We'll take a look at the walls in here. Yeah, so one thing when we're looking at stalls is we want to look at the walls. One of the things that we can do to check it is if can we rub our own hand and our own arm. Yeah, it's going to be a little rough because it's wood, but I'm not hitting any nails. I'm not hitting any snags that are out. I'm not going to trip. I'm going to trip on that. But I'm not going to cut my arm. I'm not going to ruin anything. Though, one thing, so with these stalls that are specific, if I feel that these would be checked, right, to make sure that none of them are missing or none of them are sticking out so the horse doesn't get caught up on them. Another thing that's kind of unique about these stalls is the solid siding all the way up. I know some stalls have like little windows between. So when stalls do have windows between horses, it's also important to make sure that the bars are good, that if they need, because I know some horses, if they don't like their neighbor, will have smaller threaded wire through the bars. So always checking those is important as well. We have, the place that I work, our turnouts, we just turn them out into a pasture.
Like right here, the little paddocks right here.
I'm not exactly positive. If I had to guess, like 20 by 15 maybe? Yeah, yes. Yes, yeah, very nice, yes. Yes. Why don't we come back down here? Let's see what the other group is doing. How do you guys feel about the width of these doors going in and out of them? Did you feel crowded when you were walking in and out of the paddock and that door coming back and forth through them? Yeah, no, doors are pretty roomy. Yep. Yes, very important. Another thing in the stalls that's kind of specific to here and other stalls, other facilities might have them, you guys might have them, is they have these salt block holders as well. So those are important also to check because if if those wires get bent out or if a horse bites it off, you're definitely going to want to make sure that you're making that the horse isn't going to get caught up and scratch itself on the salt block. At home, what problems do you guys have with your stalls? Yeah, I know specifically where I have horses at, our stalls are slotted upwards, so see how these boards run horizontal, ours run vertical, and if a back kicks them, that post will just fly right out into the hallway. So that's another thing to make sure is that all your wood is securely stalled into your facilities. You can see that they have fans here as well, which Dr. Hiney had kind of mentioned earlier.
So with that north wind coming through the door, you really don't need
But making sure that wires, so like the extension cords and or even the lead, as this one's saying here, you're going to want to make sure that the horse can't reach it at all times. Because if they can, they're going to chew through it. If they can reach it, they're going to chew it.
And also ideally you should have a fan that's a closed motor fan.
Yes, yeah.
Versus the regular
Yeah.
Costco, Walmart
Yeah.
fan that you stick in the house.
Yes, yeah.
In your studies, is wood the most beneficial and economical way to build a stall?
Yes.
Are there other materials that you'll find?
Between wood and then a plexiplastic to put up stalls for fronting of stalls. So places like Congress where they have those plexiplastic big stalls that they put up in the Coliseums, those are but those are more economical than other materials going up in barns. Having heavy studded, like heavy metals in the barn, I know that's expensive as well. You've got to get welders to come out as well if something breaks. But wood is the most typical that you find when putting up stalls and putting up materials.
What type of wood is
Probably something strong, more like oaks. You wouldn't want to use like plywood to put up your stalls because that'll break when they kick through it. I know some people will do start with wood stalling this and then do a layer of insulation and then a layer of plywood. I'm from Michigan, we have to do that or we'll freeze in the barn. So that's another thing to look out for is holes in the plywood if a barn is built like that, because if they kick, they'll put a hole in the plywood and then that insulation can get out and kind of be a mess.
Do you prefer the sliding doors or doors that swing open?
Personally, I prefer sliding ones because when you have swing ones, horses can push them open. Like if I walked in the stall, closed it most of the way, just had it open a crack and turned my back, I've got that split second for that horse to dash out. The sliding door, it can still be pushed open, but if that horse is moving, I can at least try to slide it back instead of like having to reach out and grab it, if that makes sense.
Also, I think with the doors opening and closing, it just makes an obstacle in the aisle.
Yes,
People are
yep.
walking their horses up and down.
Yeah, obstacles and aisles causes, yeah. Yeah, so I prefer sliding doors. Actually, the place I work has flip doors, which is why I prefer sliding doors, especially when like, cleaning stalls. If you put up a wheelbarrow right in there and close that door, I've got a couple horses in there that like to just, oh, I can go in the aisleway now. No, we can't.
Because they can
Yeah.
end up the wheelbarrow in the process.
Yeah. Having exercise facilities for your horses outside of where you keep your horses for pleasure or rest is really important for their mental stimulation, and it also helps them kind of get in focus when they go to exercise or go to train. As you can see, we've got 3 different exercising facilities up here. The first one we're going to talk about is the arena. So arenas are, I'm sure we've all seen an arena. If not, it's typically a very large patch of spreaded dirt. Some arenas are covered, some aren't, some are completely open, some are completely closed, some have like panel siding, some have regular siding. It really depends on where you go, but wherever you go, most arenas at least have a general common theme, which is that they are large. So arenas are where you would take your horse to do entire patterns, exercise on extensive, so if you wanted to lope circles for a long time, or if you wanted to practice reining, you would do things in the arena where you would have more areas to turn around and do your practicing. Typically, the footing is really important in an arena. That is one of the most important things about the arena. So it's usually a mixture of dirt, sand, and sometimes clay, depending on how sandy things can get. But you want to make sure that it isn't too sludgy. You want to make sure it's not too deep or too thin, which is really important for your horse, because if it's too deep, your horse is going to be dragging its feet, harder to get around. If it's too thin, it runs the chance of your horse and or sliding around if that arena does have like a concrete floor and the dirt on top of it, which there are multiple like show arenas that do have concrete floors and just bring in dirt. So it's really important to check that out before you decide to run your horse on it. Another really important thing about the arena footing is the moisture of it. If that arena is way too dry and that's all sandy and everyone's running around, it's going to get dusty. As a rider, you're going to have trouble breathing. As a horse that's exercising, they're going to have trouble breathing, and it can cause issues down the road if you're constantly exercising in a very dusty place. On the contrary to that, if it's super muddy and wet with standing water, that can also pose a big threat to your horse. So that can be sliding around, it can get all caught up in their frogs. Very important to check the moisture to make sure that it's not too wet or not too dry before you go in.
Do you have recommended depths
Yes.
for different disciplines? 'Cause I know like the dressage people like it this way, carriage drivers like it this way, and jumpers like it this way.
Yes.
People like it this way.
Yeah, so all of that, it's a great question. And all of it depends on what you want from the horse. So like what we call a rail horse or a pattern horse, it's more drivers are going to want it pretty shallow because wheels are hard to go through with deep.
I do carriage driving.
And so, yeah, so the facilities that are going to work well for, you know, a barrel horse or a cutting horse are going to be the exact wrong for a carriage horse. And so what can be challenging for like a boarding stable, they have to kind of hit an all-around footing because so many people are doing different things. And so it can be really, really challenging. Like if you want to ride a reining horse, you have to have very specific ground so the horse can slide through it. But all of them are actually going to be to that 2 to 4. So the ones that movement and quality movement is more important are going to be more at the 2, and the ones that need more traction and give to them are going to be more at the 4. Anything past that's going to be too deep, and anything under 2 is going to be too shallow. And so within that 2, literally that's the margin, about those 2 inches is going to be what type of horse uses that dirt. Great question.
Yeah, all right. Next, we're going to go on to walkers. So walkers, you may or may have not seen one. Some people have them, some people don't. I feel that the tie-down walkers are kind of getting a little outdated. Not a ton of people have them anymore. Freestyle walkers are becoming really popular, especially in like rehab facilities like this and or training facilities. Walkers are a great place to put your horse to either warm them up or cool them down, or even on those days where you just simply do not have time. It is a great place to let them get their energy out, let them get their daily exercise, let them cool down if you have to go work another horse. Walkers can be completely different styles. As you can see, that one is enclosed as a freestyle, and this is an open freestyle over here. And then that one is going to be a tie-on walker. So tie-on walkers are going to clip to their halters, and you're going to control the speed that your horse goes. You are going to speed it up, slow it down, throw it in reverse. You're going to do whatever you want with that horse while it's on the tie-on walker. Freestyle walkers kind of give the horse a little more movement ability to speed up or slow down with the walker. As again, you're going to set the speed, you're going to start the walker, but with the space that the horse has and that walker, it can slow down, speed itself up, do what it needs to in that space, which is why a lot of people have started using them as a way to like more let the horse express itself while it's exercising or cooling down rather than just tying it on.
Have any of you guys seen a walker before? Yeah. Okay, what kinds have you seen? The regular one that they tie on? Those are really common for racehorses. And so you see those quite a bit. What kind have you seen? First, and you've seen the free system? Yeah, those cost a little bit more, but they are nice because you don't have the horse tied up. One of the disadvantages to tying them on is their heads tend to stay more elevated, and sometimes we actually want them to drop their head up. So, you've seen one? Yeah?
I've seen one at my
The middle one? Okay. Again, super
Yeah.
popular. Sometimes you'll see people even bid a horse up. So they'll put the saddle on and put the bridle on so that the horse has to kind of have a frame on his horse. You saw the last one? You guys get around a lot.
I've also seen
Yep. All of them? Wow, you guys, you are a well-traveled group. So, first one and second one. Okay. Have any of you ever used them? You've used them?
one up there.
There we are. We're gonna go look at it in a little bit. So you've used it?
Yeah, we just
Okay. What kind of horses do you guys have? Okay. Very good. All right. For your friend, you just tie them on, make them go. That's a perfect way to do it. All right. Last one. Then we're gonna look at it.
Right, we're going to talk about, last one we're going to talk about is round pens. As you can see, I set up 3 different kinds of round pens as well. Just like the freestyle, or just like the walkers, they can be enclosed, they can be open, they can be indoors, they can be outdoors. Round pens have a lot of versatility for them. A lot of round pens are used for warming up and training. So round pens can expand their size for different training tactics and for different warm-ups that you're going to be doing. The most typical is at minimum a 33 feet diameter, or sorry, radius. So you're going to want to make sure that that horse and you have enough space to exercise without having too much space for things to get out of control. That is one of the good things about a round pen, is using it on horses that might need a little more encouragement to behave better, or horses that need a little more training before you go in somewhere like an arena where it's open and they have all that space to take off. A round pen is going to keep you safe and in a controlled environment without posing a runaway option for that horse. It's also very important to make sure that the footing in your round pen is good along with the footing in the arena, because that is the next transition. From the round pen, you're going to go to the arena, so you want to make sure that that round pen is also safe for your horse.
All right, we're going to go do some more facility inspection. You guys game? Yeah. All right. Okay. We're going to head out and go look at stuff. We can all go together this time.
Yeah.
Please. It's loose?
Very soft for the horse.
Okay, so it's got some softness to it, right? So are we in our 2 to 4 inches?
Yes.
Yeah? Yeah?
No.
No?
A little half of a foot.
Half of a foot? Well, it might be a little less than half of a foot. So, but is it super smooth?
Yeah. No.
Not super smooth. So the way it is right now is probably fine for a lot of things that horses may do, but it wouldn't be perfect for every horse, okay? Anybody know a horse that this may not work so well for?
Racing.
Okay, definitely not race horses, because it's probably too small. Dressage? They might not appreciate unlevel footing. I could see that.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. So dressage riders would probably not like this. Anybody else? Yeah, the reiners aren't going to like it either. Yep, because it needs to be way, way, way more consistent for reiners. But for most horses, is this going to be pretty good?
Yeah.
Does it look safe? Is there any rocks?
No, this is hard. This is just dirt.
Yeah, it's just dirt, okay?
And there's no grass growing in here for them to eat.
You did. It might be a dirt. So this is kind of what I would call a very good all-purpose arena, okay? It's not going to be right for everybody that has specialty horses, but for most horses, you can do a good job of exercising them in here, and it'll be just fine, okay?
I found a rough spot over there.
Uh-oh, let's go look at it. Let's go look at this rough spot. There's no fence.
What about this situation over here?
What do we think about that?
The horses can get
And
cut
some
on
rocks.
the ends. And if they paw it, they can get their hoof stuck in it. And
Okay.
break their leg.
Yeah, so is this one a good example of a super safe arena?
Or no?
No, there's too much stuff, right? And while we don't think that the horse would buck us off or get in trouble, having stuff where there's just panels that are in the arena that are loose, that's kind of potential safety issues, right?
They can fall over.
They can fall over, the horse could get caught. Horses can do some unpredictable stuff, right? What about our footing in this one compared to the other one?
This one's way deeper.
Way deeper. Okay? Could this one get a little bit
Yes.
like too deep maybe? Yeah, so this one's pretty deep. So it has some nice things about it, but the kind of the extra stuff, maybe not what we would want. So to make it safe, what would you do? We could tractor it more to level it out, kind of get that footing down.
Kind of get some of the rocks out.
Put the panels up. Don't put them in a pile. Put them up. Make them be panels. Okay.
Dust.
Dust.
And stickers.
Dust is sick and your lungs get kind of not so good, if your horse has been sick and then you ride them in a dusty arena, that can be really, really hard on them. Does that make sense? Okay, there's another type of arena out here I want you to go find. What is it? All right, let's go look at the round pen. It's hard? Yeah?
You can feel it.
Alright.
Yeah.
I can't even break it. I'm gonna throw a bomb.
Too hard? Yeah, I would agree, right? This feels, even when we're walking on it,
There's some big chunks.
big chunks for
leave the
all
chunks
of
on
the
the
young
ground.
horses in here. So what would we want to do to fix this?
Get the tractor work done.
Get some tractor work done. Yeah, so what's the difficult? Why does sometimes round pens not get worked so much?
Because the entrance is too small.
Yeah, because the entrance is too small. So then we either need like a little side-by-side or we got to pull the panel open to get the tractor and go ahead and work it. Yeah, but a lot of people forget to do that, and that results in some pretty bad ground for horses in round pens. Okay? All right, so now I've got a tape measure.
We're gonna take how long this is.
We're going to figure out the radius. Who knows what the radius is? What is a radius?
Radius is half of it.
No.
No. Radius is full of it. The diameter is half of it. I know it. It's 15 feet.
Well, that's a start. Okay. So we're going to...
Size.
So let's make sure we know what a radius is.
Radius is up and down. Up and down.
Across? How many say a radius is all the way across? How many say radius is halfway across? Okay, the halfway across is Lynn.
That was right. Well,
She was trying to figure it out.
halfway across.
Okay, so I need somebody to stand exactly in the middle. Figure out where the exact middle is.
Right here.
Okay, that's here. Okay, then I need a volunteer. You're going to hold that end. And then I need somebody to go ahead, somebody else to take this tape measure and go find me the radius. Got it? Great, go find me the radius. Who wants to guess how big it is? We have any guesses?
No, I was right.
18?
You're wrong.
18 feet.
18 feet, that's our guess on the radius. You good? 20.
Was it supposed to be like 32 feet or something? 35 feet.
25? How many feet? Two out of the way.
They said the red one was supposed to be 36. Wait, that's my guess. 36. No, what's ours about? 36. 23. 23. Halfway.
How many? 33? 23. That's 23. Yeah.
About 46 foot.
So
Probably
probably,
do the whole thing now. How long is it?
yes, do the whole one. Might as well, we're here, right?
That's right.
Now technically, if it's 23, anybody want to guess what the diameter
It's
is?
not long enough.
Yeah.
That's the,
Yeah, good job. All right.
that's as far as she goes.
That's as far as he goes. So what are we going to do?
Do half and then do another.
That's a good idea. Let's do it. Let's do it. So let's do one side and then the other. Okay. Hey, you gotta get right in the middle. Okay, how many feet is it? So let me ask you a question, guys. If you were riding a horse in here, how fast could you go in here? Yeah, you couldn't go too fast, right? Because they get to lean in too far in here. Okay, now I'm going to do a little science breakdown. Is that okay? Right? So there's some research that says making horses go in little small circles may not be the best thing for them. Yeah. What do we think about that? Feral horses have a hard time with this.
Yes, feral horses are like turn.
Yeah. So the tighter you turn, it actually is hard on you. And so if we can make our circles bigger, it's actually a little bit better for the horse. So I wasn't going to get too technical on you, but there you go. So but that's recent research. Good. You guys feel pretty comfortable finding good things and bad things in an arena? Okay. Ready to work our dirt? You guys are be tractor drivers. All right. What do you got next for us, Julia?
Next up in our barn management, we're going to talk about outside time. So when we talk about facilities, one of the big things about facilities is the pasture space. So when horses are turned out, typically you want to give them around an acre of space. A very basic, just starting, is 1 acre per horse for grazing, to make sure that you're not overgrazing and make sure that pasture can keep up with it. But that is only for partial turnout. So you don't want to have your horse out all the time on a single acre, or have multiple horses on a single acre at one time, because they will overgraze that grass and it will be very hard for the land to recover from the overgrazing. But if you want them out 24/7, depending on the production of the land and how much grass or wild hay that grows. Yeah?
Can you have 4 horses at a big area?
Yeah, well, that's what we're going to talk about right now. If you want your horses outside all the time, you gotta think about the space that they need and think about how much they eat. So that is going to up our size. So we're going to do 2 to 4 acres per horse then, if we want to turn them out 24/7, so they can always eat outside. And then if you want to have their friends outside with them, you got to make sure that there's make sure there's enough space for all of them, and then make sure that there's enough room for them to graze comfortably, along with making sure that your land has enough grass and enough food for them to eat, right? Yeah. Or else they'll get picky with each other. Before we get on to the next slide, what do we notice about these 2 pastures? Yeah?
They have fence.
They do have a fence. What's the difference between the 2 of them down the fence?
One has more grass than the other one.
Yes, yeah. So if you see this one, there's a graze line all up here. There's some grazing around their hay thing and a graze patch right there. Whereas this one doesn't really have much grazing effect on it. So that'll lead us to our next thing, where we would move paddocks. Or it'll be in further in the presentation. 2 more slides. So when we kick our horses out into pasture, it's important to keep them in the pasture, because that's the worst feeling. You walk out and you put a horse out last night and it's not there in the morning. That's not a feeling you all want to have. So types of fencing are really important and are different for each horses. One of the more popular fencing styles is this plastic paneling. That is in typically a lot of like arenas. They'll have those around. For more solid and structural fencing, you're going to want to go with the metal paneling or the studded posts with wired across. Very important to not do barbed wire at certain spots, which we'll talk about at different points. But the wires, if you do use wire with horse, it is typically a threaded wire without anything sticking out to ensure that your horse doesn't get hurt. You can also do electric fencing, which not a ton of people do with horses unless we're talking about mobile pastures. All right, here's our rotational fencing that we were talking about. So as you can see, it starts up really light at the top. So that's where we're going to keep our horses. There's some really chunky horses. Just picture them like that. We're going to keep our horses up top for a little bit, let them graze that area, hang out, and then in a week or 2, depending on how many horses and how much they're grazing, we're going to move them down to the pasture just a little south of them. Let them eat that, while the first one grows back, and then after they're done with the second, move on to the third. And then when they're done, we're going to start the process all over again. So this is really important to make sure that your land has enough time to recover and produce nutritious grass for your horses, and it will always ensure that there's another paddock that's open for horses as well that you can switch out to. These are what bring in pretty popular with the single or two-stranded electric fences. You can split up pastures with just stringing one across, and it's easier to move them down and rearrange those. A lot of them are going to be more temporary type fencing rather than true like paneled wire or studded posts as well. Okay, fencing safety. The most important things that we're going to talk about is making sure that your fence doesn't have gaps and it doesn't have anything sticking out. So as you can see here, Mr. Troublemaker saw that there were gaps in their fencing and thought he could go through it. It's really important to check your horses and make sure that they're not getting tangled in that fence if you do have loose wired fencing. And this is another reason that we don't want to use barbed wire with them, is if a horse wants to stick their head and graze out other side of the pasture, they're going to try, they're going to do it. And if you have barbed wire, it can cut up their body, it can cut up their neck, and especially if they get tangled in it, then you have the issue of trying to keep yourself safe untangling them without trying to not further injure your horse while untangling them. When it comes to babies, you never want to use it with, barbed wire, you never want to use it with babies. Babies are going to get into anything and everything. They don't know any better. Typically, the only time that you really do use barbed wire is if you're going to run horses in a large pasture. I'm talking like acres. You're not going to see your horse for a couple days because it's in the back of it. That way the horse never feels pressured to run into the fence, come up, or never feels that it has to get away from whatever's in the pasture with it. Another thing that's really important is the height of the fence. So if we have some jumping horses, we're going to want to make sure our fences are taller. That way that they aren't in your front yard when you wake up in the morning. Another thing about the taller horses is if we have a Clydesdale and we have Miss Rosalita, wherever she is, those two are going to need two different size fences. A fence this high is going to keep her in, but it is not going to keep a Clydesdale in. So you kind of want to adjust to the height of your horse and to the attitude of the horse. Checking the tops and bottoms of the fences are really important too. So you know how we talked about the gaps with the stalls that horses can get their foot caught in and hurt themselves? It's the same way with fences. You want to make sure that there's a little bit of room for them to graze or no room at all, because you don't want to encourage them to putting their feet through it. If there is gaps, you want to make sure that there's a big enough gap or a medium-sized enough gap that it's not big enough for them to stick their leg through, but just enough for them to graze underneath it. All right, we're going back outside. We're going to look at some of our pastures and our fencing.
What do we think? Is there enough grass?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about that as a group once we have everybody. So we're going to talk about, is there enough grass? So you guys say there's enough grass?
Yeah.
Okay, I heard a no.
Look up there. There's a whole
We're going to go look at that grass. Yeah, so everybody says there's a whole bunch of grass over there.
Not enough grass here, but there's a whole bunch.
Okay, so maybe not enough grass here, but maybe there's a bunch of grass over there.
Because it gets more water. And it'll give it time.
Let's go look at that grass. Yeah.
Why they're eating. That's what she does. She hears food. She hears food. She's like, move right here and move.
Okay, we're going to look at this grass.
Yeah.
Right here is more weeds, but grass is a little taller.
All right, but if we were looking here, is there a lot of grass? No.
Yeah.
What is this growing?
Weeds.
Weeds. Are they going to eat that? No. So even if we look out and see tall stuff, sometimes and there can be like things in there that get in their gums.
And it makes them sick.
All right. Okay, so this grass is a little taller right here, but they didn't eat it. Why?
There's weeds in it.
It's not just the weeds.
There's poop.
There's poop. Did you know that horses won't eat the grass where they pooped?
My mom's horse was. He would sniff his poop and everything and eat by the pit.
But that mostly, if we look at these pastures, do you see how there's spots that are really, really, really short?
Yes.
And then you're like, look at this nice grass. And they won't eat it.
Because there's poop.
That's right. So horses will graze part of it down to nothing. So like, look at, this is pretty tall here, right? So this is what,
Right
4 or
here
5
is okay
inches?
to eat. Right here.
It seems like that'd be a great place to eat, right?
It's not poisonous.
And so even though there's only 2 horses out here, look what they've done. So I might ask the parents,
I know the poisonous.
what do we do? How do we solve this problem?
Oh, they coming.
Hay feeder. A hay feeder. That's one great way to do it. Pick up the poop. Pick up the poop.
That's what mine was.
That's a good one. So how many of you picked the poop out of your pasture?
Takes forever.
Oh, you guys are awesome.
And then one you could put them in a different pasture. Great. Put this dirt and plant some new.
That's a good one. We can put them in a different pasture and plant some new grass. What did Julia teach you?
Oh, you go to the pasture so they can.
The horse. Yeah, we might have to. The horses are coming. Well, they might, eat the equipment. So we can make this work a little bit better, even though for these 2 horses, it might not be worth all the effort in doing rotational grazing. But you can see, don't run towards them.
That's a bad idea.
But this is kind of what horses do. So you'll see areas that they eat and then areas that they're not bothering to eat at all. Okay? So we can kind of see that pattern of how horses eat grass. But our fence is pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Okay?
No, not really. Not really. They can get your head stuck up in there. And
They
get your,
could. Yep. So
or
that's possible.
if they try to kick the feet through, they can get their back caught in there.
They could, but it's a little less likely. This is pretty safe fencing for horses. Yeah.
It won't cut them up like you already got.
Yeah. Okay. Now, just because I don't know these horses, we're going to head back this way. Yep. We're going to head back out. Exactly. I'm the safety police here, so you guys move that way.
Everybody follow us.
Yes. It's a big guy. All right, let's head out.
I feel bad.
Next, we're going to talk about stuff or housing recommendations. So either things in the stalls to help your horse, things outside that'll help your horse, everything about keeping them comfortable. All right, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is shelters. So if you look at the back, you can see the shelters of Nexus. They were in the pastures that we were in. Shelters are very important to providing your horse protection from the elements while they're outside. So it's really important to think about the wind, the rain, and the sun are your big elements that you're going to want to focus on. So as you can see, these ones have different kinds of sheltering. Some of them are just sunshade shelters to keep them out of direct sunlight, to keep them cooled down. Some of them are completely closed shelters to keep wind out and wind, rain, snow, all the seasons, to keep them out somewhere where the horses can go. Or some of them are half sheltered, where they can keep wind from one side, keep rain from one side, and keep air flowing from the other. Sorry. Next, we're going to talk about the bedding in the stalls. So, if you want, you can peek into these stalls and look. So they're kind of shallow on bedding, but the pads on the flooring are very supportive for the horse's hooves. So when we talk about bedding, there's 4 main bedding that people use. So shavings like this right here, sawdust, which is finer than that kind of shaving. Yes.
And we also do hay.
Yeah. Well, straw. Or there's pelleted bedding is essentially shavings smushed down into a pellet. You water it, fluffs right up. It turns into almost like a sandy texture. And then for heavier winters or places for outside shelters, I know a lot of people use straw because it's very cost effective to cover a big space. Talking about matting, as I said, so these stalls have really good mats. So when we were walking in, you could feel the cushion on your feet. The more matting and comfort that your horse has, the less bedding that you can use. That doesn't mean don't put any bedding in, because you always want bedding, your horse to have bedding, because you want to be able to suck up the urine and the feces. But if you have good mats, you can get away with like lower amounts of bedding, but you still want to have 1 to 2 inches in there for them with your mats. If there's no mats, you're going to want way more bedding, because you want your feet, or you want your horse's feet to have comfort, and you want them to have a little cushion when they're standing in their stall, so they don't crack their hooves and or pull something while they're hanging out. All right, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but the spatial awareness of your stall. So making sure that your horses have enough room to comfortably turn around, lay down, look out the window, do whatever they want in their stall is really important. You don't want your horses to be put up and feel cramped and too dulled in, because then next time you get them out, they're gonna be feeling themselves. They're gonna want to stretch out and exercise. So it's really important that your horse is comfortable physically on all 4 sides of the stall. So talk about the ceiling, the sides, and the floor. Another thing that we kind of mentioned a little bit earlier was having feed spaces in your stall. So allocating spaces for your feed and hay to make sure that it's not just spread all over the stall is really important to not only keep your stalls cleaner, but to make sure that your horse is actually consuming what you're giving them, and you can monitor their hay intake and monitor their food intake as well. So what do we kind of see is the difference between these feeders?
Well, one was, one on the
Lalita, come
on
here.
the ground. The other one. And that's yours.
Yes. Yes. So this hay, if a, yes, yeah. So when the hay is on the floor like that, horses can paw, they can spread it all over. Your stall's gonna be a mess. Your horse is gonna waste a lot of its hay. It's not gonna consume what it's need. And specifically, so when we look at this one, we've got a little guy. See how he can almost barely reach his feeder? He's kind of got his head up and in it. We want to make sure that that horse is comfortable, can reach its feeder. So if we do have a miniature horse or a smaller horse, or Miss Rosalita here, you want to make sure that their feeders are head level or a little lower. So that is their natural eating position, is to be grazing head down. You want to make sure that that is comfortable for horses.
And not up like that.
Yes, not up like that. You don't want them having to reach for it.
Like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not much. That's this.
Yeah. We're going to talk about the mental stimulation of stalls. So just like if you were locked in your room without a phone, without anything, you want to keep yourself entertained. These horses that are in the stalls, you want to make sure that they're not just going to stand there and look at the wall, because horses are emotional creatures. They can get depressed. You want to make sure that they are mentally active, up and about, looking at things. There's lots of different ways that you can do that. Hay nets are a really popular one. Those are kind of separate from the grazing rule. You can keep them kind of head level because it makes it a little harder for them to get their hay. They've got to work for their food, keeps them engaged with it. And similar to that is food puzzles. So these are really popular for dogs right now, but you can do the same thing with a horse. You can put their grain in the bottom of a pail, put some stuff over it, make them find it. It helps with their scavenge instinct and help them look for things. It also keeps them very entertained and really gets their mind going about working for their food and making sure that they're engaged in what they're doing. Having stall toys is also really fun. So we've got a Jolly Ball over here. Does anyone have Jolly Balls at home? Yeah. Yeah, so Jolly Balls are really fun because they're almost indestructible. And I say almost very, There's some horses that can get through them, but jolly balls provide a way for a horse to use both their legs and their mouths to get exercise in. They can kick the ball around, they can pick it up, throw it around. Hanging styles things in the stall as well, just like this, are also popular. There are different homemade ones you can do, quite literally tying up a stick from a hay string, have it over, the horse can flip it around, play with it. A milk carton is another one that horses don't really. Yes, milk cartons, they don't really bite into them, but it's they just kind of play with it, toss it around, just a little something, mental stimulation for hanging out in their stall. And another really important thing is to visualize your barn mates. So horses are herd creatures, they are social animals, and they love their friends. We probably all know a horse that's buddy sour, doesn't like to be away, and every time it is, it's screaming and crying. That's why we want to make sure horses, when they're in a stall, can look at their barn mates so they can communicate with who's in the barn with them. They can see if there's danger. It kind of goes back to their very natural instincts of herd style together. Horses, different whinnies, different neighs, everything can mean something to a horse that we don't necessarily understand. Is there any, do you guys have any mental stimulation stuff in your stalls?
That's okay. They don't need
Yeah.
a source.
Yeah, you can always throw a jolly ball out in the pasture with them too.
As a jolly ball, yeah. Okay, well, I know we might have run a little longer than we had kind of planned on. But do you guys have any final questions for Julia or anything that we've done? Anything that you guys want to learn? Good? Was it at least a little entertaining? Woohoo! Well, we hope you guys learned something and can take a few fun facts home. We do have evaluations, right, Todd?
Yes.
Okay,
Should be right down
so
there with the
there's some
pencils.
evaluations with pencils there. I might figure out where the barn lights